Biofilm Podcast, a show that brings you to the forefront of biomedical research, biotech, pharma, and healthcare fields, and the professionals behind it. I'm your host, Violet Roth. Please subscribe and spread the word. Hit the notification bell to stay up to date. Let's get started.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for joining this Biofilm Podcast, episode number 3. It's an honor to have you. You're one of the most prolific science communicators that I've come across. And you are also a fellow scientist as well as an entrepreneur. And now you have your own Biofluent Communications company, which is a writing agency. And I'm super honored to have you here today. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pavel.
Thank you. So it is such an honor to have you. And before we jump really into talking about everything that has to do with you and your career and where you are now, I guess I want to make a bit of a disclaimer and ask you, since this podcast is called Biofilm Podcast, my first question to you is, what is the latest movie that you have watched recently?
Yeah, so I actually am a huge film buff. I watch a lot of movies. The weirder, the better for me. And so the one I want to share is called Border. It is on Hulu right now. And it's a movie that's set somewhere, I think it's in Norway, somewhere in the Netherlands maybe. It's subtitled. It's about this woman who, she kind of looks like a Neanderthal, and she also can smell when people feel shame. So she actually works as a border security person, and she's like sniffs people as they walk by, and she can tell if they're hiding something. And then she encounters a man who looks like her and has some of the same characteristics. And he ends up knowing a lot more about their backstory as people in their condition. And it's just a really interesting film that has a lot of twists and turns. It was surprising. The whole thing surprised me, and it's hard to surprise me in a film. So I would highly suggest Border.
So on the topic of this particular movie, I know you're also a horror film genre fan. So is this something that that movie was also a horror movie?
There's not a lot of horror in this movie. However, some people might find it a little disturbing.
Okay.
So, if weird movies aren't your thing, then I would not recommend it. But if they are, then I think you would like it.
Yeah, awesome. So you have more time now, you feel, to watch some of those weirder movies that you always wanted to watch?
I always make time to watch weird movies. We have a little independent theater over here in Santa Ana called the Frida that I go to sometimes. They play old, like, David Lynch movies, which okay. I've had fun. Yeah.
I mean, are you planning on supporting this local movie theater when it reopens, when and if it reopens?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So I guess now switching gears towards specifically focusing on you. So I know you had an early fascination with thermodynamics, and I was really hoping to find out about why this specific topic is something that you're fascinated with.
I think what it was about thermodynamics was that it uses experimentation, which all engineering does, to describe phenomenon in the world. Really, I mean, it's to describe the physics that's going on. And what I think is so fascinating about that is that, I mean, you could argue that everything is predetermined, because if we're always following the laws of physics, and each one of our atoms and photons and, getting to those tiny little particles, each one of those is following a set of rules. So who's to say that it's not necessarily predetermined on where this is going to go next because of the rules that it follows. So I actually take that to the extreme, and I don't believe in free will at all. I think that we are all just chemicals moving around, and science to me is sort of the proof of that.
Yeah. Do you think you have more opportunities now to engage in these more esoterical and these sort of philosophical discussions,
Yeah. Well, being especially too in the scientific community, that's where you can have these higher level discussions. It's harder to have these discussions with people who haven't ever taken physics before, or who are really bad at math. A lot of people are, and really might not understand how a particle knows where it's going to go next.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, being in this community and in these times, I think atheism is accepted more than it used to be as well when I was growing up. So yes, we can absolutely have these kinds of conversations
Yeah.
more.
To me, the beauty of science, the reason why I wanted to ask this question about thermodynamics is when I was in community college, I had a great opportunity to take different science classes like pure math, physics, biology, chemistry, and really see the connections and make the connections myself about all those different layers of organization, including that we all are, a bunch of small subatomic particles, and then trace them all the way to how our cells work, how our whole bodies work. So
Exactly.
it's very fascinating to me, like the science allows us to really grasp in full extent, to the best of our knowledge, obviously, this very gigantic concepts.
Exactly.
So in your early career, I know you worked in Amgen in process development unit for a few years, and this you done, if I'm not mistaken, after you did your bachelor's. So how did this experience come about, and how did it influence you?
I think it was a really smart move for me to work before I went to grad school, because I didn't know what I wanted to do next. My bachelor's degree is in chemical engineering, which is where I was taking thermodynamics. But I didn't love chemical engineering at the time. When I went to school, there was no such thing as bioengineering or biomedical engineering. That was brand new. Only a few schools in the US even had bioengineering programs. So when I joined in 1999, it was chemical engineering was the closest thing. And then I was able to take a biomedical option. And so I did take some bio classes, but not a lot. So when I joined Amgen in process development, it made sense with my chemical engineering background. But when I was there, I was actually doing a lot of cell biology. So my goal, and Amgen was one of the first biotech companies to use cells to create the product, which at the time also was very new. So what my group was doing was research on how to what kind of media to use to make those cells produce more of the product that we were making, and could we reduce the animal products out of the media, because there were issues with mad cow disease, and you didn't want to use fetal bovine serum to create other products. So as a safety issue, we were trying to get away from using animal products. And that was a great experience for me, because I got to learn what I don't know about cell biology. And it was a roadblock for me because I didn't have that background. And I was really interested in it and fascinated by it. So it really helped me to decide what major to have in my PhD program. And I had decided on pure biology. I was interested in cell biology specifically, and ended up doing my work in molecular biology. So it was pivotal.
So when you transition from this environment at Amgen, where you're results oriented and trying to optimize the product essentially, into the grad school where you're just at the cutting edge and nobody's around you in terms of who knows as much as you do about a particular topic, how was that switch like for you, going from that industry to academic environment?
It was really similar in the way that we performed experiments. And that's the crux of any kind of research, is the experiment. And what's really important is how to structure that experiment with all your controls so that you can really come to a good conclusion. So in that way, it was really similar. In the way it was different was, when you're in grad school, you have one boss and there's nobody above that person. And so I always said it like you're on the ship. And you have a captain, and you all kind of work together, but at the end of the day, you answer to that one person. But at a company, especially a big established company like Amgen, there were layers upon layers of people. So, your boss wasn't the one making all the decisions about you. Also, if you had a problem with your boss, you could go to their boss, and so on and so on. And we would have skip level meetings. I think the way they did it at Amgen at the time was great for me. So in that way, the research was also, I don't want to say it was harder. It was more independent, that was for sure. I was deciding what I would do next, and trying to learn experiments that had never been done before, and having to sort of gain mentors in lots of different places. I had a lot of postdoc mentors from different labs that taught me different things and different techniques. So, and I don't know that you always get that at a company. I haven't actually done a lot of research at a company before, but maybe it's similar in the R&D departments.
So would you say that you always had the dream when you joined Amgen, you had that grad school in mind, or this is something that sort of developed over time?
I did always want to go to grad school. I always wanted to get a PhD. That's partially because both of my parents have higher degrees, so I kind of felt pressured. And I also, you know, looking back, I probably did it for not the best reasons. Just to have those letters after my name, not a good reason.
Yeah.
But I am very glad because of what I learned. The depth that you go into in molecular biology is just so interesting. And also the fact that I feel that I can learn, I can do anything now. Nothing is beyond me, because that's how it had to be when I was there.
Yeah. So you think, for me, when I joined the PhD, I like to say I joined it because I was super curious about protein structure. What was your main motivation to really go and like really dive head first into this environment?
It was about cell biology. It was about knowing, you know, yourself. You really can't understand yourself if you don't understand cells. And so that's what I really wanted to learn. And that's what was also important at Amgen, because you're working with cells. Yes, you're trying to produce a product, but how does the cell create that product? And that's instrumental with every cell in your body. How is it creating those specific proteins to make that certain tissue, and why does it do that? And so it was a lot of questions of why that grad school answered.
Yeah, so in your PhD, you focused on host virus interactions and specifically work with adenovirus. And you contributed to understanding of adenovirus-mediated disruption of P53 pathway. And I was curious to know, like, how did that first Nature paper come about? Like, what was your experience writing it and just contributing to it?
Oh, let's not talk about the experience writing it, but so just to reiterate, we found the most important thing we found was that P53 can look activated, which means it's phosphorylated, it's not bound to any of its repressors, but it's not actually activating those genes as a transcription factor. So it was assumed before we started this work that P53 was active and all of the genes were turned on. But in reality, there was a change in the chromatin structure around those P53 target genes. And the heterochromatization around those genes are what prevented P53 from actually ever binding to DNA in the first place. And I think beyond the virus, beyond P53, I think the most important lesson to be learned there was not to make assumptions, because earlier the assumption was P53 is activated, oh, its genes must be turned on as well, but they weren't. And I think that's something important to think about in every single experiment, in every conclusion that we make. I want to relate it back to what we're going through now with the coronavirus. And we are assuming that creating a vaccine and having antibodies are going to prevent us from being reinfected, at least with the same strain.
Right.
But we don't know that for sure until we've gone through a cycle and people can show that you are not being reinfected, or that the virus isn't mutating super quickly and going to reinfect us with a different type where our antibodies aren't going to see it, just like the flu happens every year. So we need to be careful with our conclusions. and be sure that we're looking at the endpoint conclusion and not allowing these assumptions to point us in the wrong direction.
Yeah. Do you feel like if you had a background of well, I guess in viruses too, to some extent, you're being asked more questions now about what happens in this pandemic, or not so much?
A little. I thought I would have a lot more questions, to be honest. I think
Right.
people really want my take on, oh, is this really as scary as we should think it is? And to be honest, the answer is I don't know.
Mhm.
And I don't think anybody really knows. We have all these numbers, but are they correct? Do
Mhm.
we really know how many people were actually infected?
Mhm.
No, we don't. Do we know if we have immunity? No, we don't.
Mhm.
Do we know how long it's going to take to make a vaccine, or if it's going to work? No. So there's all of these things that we don't know, which is
Mhm.
why I think people are going, way far to being very, very cautious, which is fair. But also we need to be careful that we're not, ruining what we've created so far in our society.
Absolutely. In your PhD, do you feel you had a make or break type of moment, which I think maybe a lot of people do? Like, what was your moment?
Um, I kind of don't. I can't think of an exact moment.
Hmm.
It really was a progression of just going through it and getting wiser through the process. Both wiser in my knowledge of myself and also the subject, and also just how the world works, and also what I want out of life. Um, and I think really it didn't come until after I graduated and was out for a few years, that there was really more of like these wake up moments, where I was really figuring out what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. It was more of a slow progression.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say, like, I can resonate with what you're saying, because now that I've had just, like, I guess a couple of months after my PhD, now I'm starting to sort of
Mm,
really reflect back on it and really
right.
think about what did I learn throughout these,
Hmm.
few years. So it doesn't come right away, because it's just, yeah, that's not how it works. You have to
Exactly.
take some space before you can really reflect and really
You have to
understand.
get back into real society
Yeah.
and interact with real people, to understand who you are as a PhD. I
Yeah.
think, we live in this bubble when we're in grad school. Everyone around us is brilliant,
Hmm.
probably smarter than each of us are. At
Yeah.
least we feel
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
definitely.
when you get out into the real world, and you've still got a while to go, although, however, you can still be stuck in that environment when you're at a company and you're in R&D, and it's those same people. Um,
Yeah,
but,
I was gonna say that since I finished it, I ended up in as you were saying, you're supposed to interact with the real world, but I'm kind of like, well, I can't do that now. So
yeah,
I'm just in this my own bubble now and just
yeah.
trying to reflect on that. So that kind of was not the best timing, maybe. So ever since I guess your PhD, I think you had this passion for science communication. Where did that really start? Did that start in your PhD, or it started a little bit earlier than that?
It actually did. So one thing that was neat that I got to do at the Salk Institute, so we had a lot of donors that would donate, millions of dollars, and they started this Biology 101 program for the donors.
Hmm.
And so I was one of the speakers at that. And so we would have donors that, didn't know anything about biology, and we would have to explain our research to them.
Hmm.
And so that's kind of how it started, where I would take this complex stuff and boil it down to what's important, what is the average person going to understand. And the number one thing that to get across is the impact. How is this going to impact you?
Hmm.
And luckily we were working on something that was really interesting, which was trying to create an oncolytic adenovirus.
Hmm.
So everyone can understand treating cancer. Hearing about it from a virus perspective was different,
Hmm.
and that was fun to talk about.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of how it started, is in presentations, not necessarily in writing. That came later.
Okay. So would you say that? So you volunteered for that, or this is something that? Okay. Okay. So what was the maybe initial inspiration? Did you had that kind of experience of talking about science to your, I mean, maybe not your family, because as you said, they had, degrees, but maybe to your friends as you were going through this, arduous PhD journey too?
Yeah, a little, not a ton. Also, when you're doing your research, it's relatively slow.
Hmm.
So you don't have to update your family all the time. You
Yeah.
kind of tell them once what you're doing and that's it. But yeah, I think that came later. Again, yeah, it wasn't like that.
Yeah. So for all the viewers, I think it's important to also say that we've met with you, Kristen, a little over a year ago, and at a networking event. And obviously, it goes without saying that how much our world has changed since then.
Mm.
Specifically, when it comes to these types of networking events, which we may or may not see in the short term or even long term. So, what do you think is the most profound change when it comes to this networking? How do you think you're gonna go and explore new connections?
So I've already been doing that. I think there's three ways to keep in touch with people. So one is the obvious, is just calling that one person over the phone, or you could do a video chat, or even just messaging them.
Hmm.
Reaching out to those people that you haven't talked to in years sometimes. So that's one thing I've been doing. Another thing I've been doing is I was invited to like a little video chat happy hour.
Hmm.
So I'm actually doing another one. So if you are in the Orange County or LA or even San Diego area, there's a group called Biotech Connections Los Angeles, BCLA, and we're doing a happy hour, I think tomorrow. And so there's going to be a few panelists,
Mhm.
and we're going to break out into sessions that you can kind of talk more. And I've learned that about 8 people is the max that you can have, like on a Zoom call, to really get to know everybody, and you need about an hour for that. So that's another way. And then the third way is reaching out to individuals that you don't know. So usually I do that through LinkedIn. Either it goes both ways, and we'll set up a phone call. Someone I've never met before, but is in the industry, and let's just get to know each other. They don't have to be particularly relevant to my business or me to theirs, but learning about what's new for them in the industry is important to me, and then keeping up those connections. So I think there's
Definitely.
still a lot we can do.
Yeah. So you feel like it's, even though we are in this more solitary confinements, more or less, the connections are still very important to keep us going in the industry.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. Because I mean, the sharing of information is, and that's actually, kind of one of the mottos of Biofluent Communication is it's about sharing information more quickly. And when you have that information exchange, that's just going to accelerate the industry as a whole. Because what we're really doing here is we're creating knowledge and we're sharing knowledge.
Mhm.
And so I think it's important to keep that up overall, even though we can't meet in person.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned biofluent communications. So this is a perfect segue for me to really drill down on your passion for writing and how it transformed you from a scientist all the way to an entrepreneur. So where did this writing passion really start for you? What do you think was a defining moment?
I had never thought of myself as a writer at all. But the moment was when it was suggested to me by somebody.
Hmm.
Her name's Sharon Campbell, and she was in marketing at Biorad at the same time I was in marketing at Biorad. And I was leaving the company, and she suggested to me that I write. She thought that I was a great communicator, a science communicator, and she thought that my PhD was kind of being wasted in marketing, which I appreciated. And so she connected me with one of the editors at Gen magazine. And that's how I got my start in writing. And I got my first assignment, which was a roundup for a conference. And so I got to interview people and put that all together. It was a really fun fun experience because I got to learn, and then I got to teach other people what I learned. And then I got to do writing, which for me was actually pretty new, to put together an entire piece. So that was a fun thing. I always love learning a new skill. So that was definitely the turning point for me.
So then you started with that experience, and then how did it really go all the way to where you are now? Like, what were the sort of the milestones that you were hitting along the way?
So I started as a freelance writer. So I was doing the magazines, and then afterwards I started getting more clients that were actually in biotech and pharmaceutical, whether it be a diagnostics company or an instrumentation company. And so once I started to get more biotech clients, I stopped doing the magazine writing. And then once I got more popular and successful in doing the freelancing, I had to start turning away jobs, not only because I didn't have time, but because I didn't have the expertise for some of them. And that bothered me, knowing that there was this opportunity that needed to be filled and not being able to do it myself. So that's how the idea for Biofluent Communications came about, is because I wanted to be able to service everyone that needed a good science writer, even if I wasn't the expert in that area.
So when you were writing these first initial maybe 5 or 10 articles, did you had that goal in mind of really taking it all the way to where you are now, or you were just taking it as you would go, go along with the jobs?
I was definitely just taking it as I went along. I didn't know what was next for me. Yeah, I've been trying to have like a flexible career. I would really like to have a baby. So that's been the number one thing on my mind for the past few years. It's been difficult. So I had been kind of putting off, growing this business, but recently just decided to go for it and do everything
Yeah.
at once.
Yeah.
So so this has been an idea I've had for at least a year. I think most people have the idea for their business for a long time before they actually push the button and go.
Yeah, definitely. So when you have started this business, now that you have a few months under your belt as a person who runs this business, what was the most crazy thing that you had to deal with so far that you weren't prepared to deal with before?
Trusting other people is difficult. So because now I'm not doing the writing myself, I have to trust other writers to do a good job, as good as I would do doing the writing. And so that was really difficult for me. But I get writing samples, I have their resume, I see the work that they have before they turn it into the client, so I can make suggestions if I need to. And I can always step in and do writing myself if I feel like it's needed. So that was kind of the most difficult part for me, is letting go.
So I guess as a PhD trained scientist, I think the trust issue when it comes to delegating your work to other people is probably the hardest thing there ever is.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, because we're always like conditioned to be independently trained,
Yes.
do everything ourselves, and just make sure that we do it the right way. Definitely. So as an entrepreneur, what do you see yourself and this Biofluent Communications? Where do you want it to take in the next few years?
Yeah, I am not 100% sure what I want out of it yet. I definitely want to grow it. And I want to be able, my short-term goal is to be able to hire one full-time kind of like executive that will be able to kind of like take care of operations. So that's like the short-term goal. Long-term goal, it would be great to be an international company that could service biotech companies all over the world, and be able to have enough writers to do that and streamline the process. I think going back to process development, something that I wanted to say about that was that process is so important, and it's something that I think, isn't appreciated as much as it should be. Process can make or break things, the companies, products. and drugs, the process that a drug has to be manufactured is a life or death situation, not just for the company, but for humans. Something that I think is really exciting to watch right now in the industry is the process development happening with cell and gene therapies. I think there's a lot of work to be done there, and a lot of optimization that could lead to efficiencies to make us a lot faster with the products, and ultimately cheaper, which is what we want as well, and then obviously safer.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see that in the industry.
So as a trained writer, essentially as a self-trained writer, what is the process that you take from starting the first sentence, the first word in that writing piece that you have to do, all the way to the finished product? Can you describe the best tips and tricks sort of
I
in
think
terms of writing?
everyone's different. Some people love to start with an outline. I'm not one of those people. I practice telling the story, even just in my head. I think about it. My best friend, she is not a scientist, but she's a smart person. So I think about how would I explain this to her? And that helps me to get what's the most important point? What's the impact that whatever I'm writing about has? What is that point I want to get across immediately to make that person be interested in what I'm talking about? And so then I just start writing, honestly, and it kind of just comes out. Also, I do research. So when I'm doing research on the article, whatever piece it is, I'll have a page where I'll kind of copy and paste a lot of things, whether it be from Wikipedia or from published papers or wherever I'm getting the information from. I throw it all on a page, then I can reference that back later. And then I'll put links in also to where I found that stuff. The research portion is really important. You want to make sure that you get a full picture and that you're writing about it all accurately.
Yeah. So looking back to where you are now in terms of your writing skills, what were maybe some of the best feedbacks and critiques that you got over the years in terms of how to improve your own writing?
I had one editor at when I was still at Bio-Rad, actually, who was so good at nitpicking every little grammatical thing. And since I never really was a writer before, that really helped me to see those mistakes that I was making over and over and not make them. So, people ask me a lot of the time when if they're trying to become a writer, what's important. And getting an editor, it doesn't have to even be a professional. It would be nice. But if you could just have somebody who you trust, just look at your work and point out those little things that you're doing incorrectly, that really helps to improve your writing.
Yeah. So now that we have had almost about a month and a half, depending how much we count in terms of this coronavirus pandemic, what was the most striking thing that you found when it comes to your business and when it comes to yourself? Like, what were the most revolutionary experiences that you underwent throughout this time so far?
For the business, things have slowed down, which is not surprising because now marketing budgets are unclear. Do you want to spend that extra $1,000 this month on a blog post? Maybe not, because people might be getting laid off. So where does your marketing budget stand next quarter?
Mm-hmm.
What are you actually marketing? Is it something different? Because all of the writing that we do at Biofluent is for marketing purposes and sales purposes. So, things are just so uncertain right now. People don't want to spend that money on something that seems that it could be superfluous to sales, which I totally understand, which is fine with me. Because this business is just getting rolling, I'm fine with taking a little downturn right now. I think that it'll pick up as soon as the economy opens up, especially with the new light that has been shown on the biotech industry specifically.
Yeah.
I think there's going to be more blogs and marketing material pieces to come out really soon. So I think next year is probably going to be a huge year for us. We'll see how it goes. But on a personal level, things really didn't change for me a lot because I had knee surgery about 8 weeks ago. And because of the knee surgery, I wasn't able to walk. I wasn't able to drive. I was stuck at home anyway. So it's been longer for me than for most people.
Yeah.
I did go to one networking event on my crutches over here in Irvine.
Yeah. And that was probably the last before they closed everything down. Okay.
I know, it was. And I don't think anyone got coronavirus from that particular
Well, I mean,
meeting,
you're here, so
good.
that's really good. So
I still go to physical therapy for my knee, so I do get out of the house a little bit. But otherwise, I've been stuck at home anyway.
Well, I guess as you recover, hopefully the world will recover too. So let's see who recovers first. So at the end of the podcast, I'd like to give the floor to my guest, and maybe they could share a little bit of their wisdom with, for example, younger audience, such as early career professionals or graduate students or such. I'm curious to know maybe what were the few failures that you had experienced along your career as a scientist, as a writer, and that sort of have changed you in the person that you are now, that sort of helped you to go along the way.
I think not a failure, but not knowing what I wanted to do next was difficult for me because I was always a person that had a plan. I always knew what I wanted and where I was going, and I was trying to get there. After grad school, I was very confused with what I wanted next. I was confused at what was important in my life. And so getting through all of that confusion, and I don't think that anyone has ever fully gotten past what you want out of your life. You're always questioning yourself, and you always should be. But it really helped just having different jobs. So right out of grad school, I wanted to get as far away from the bench as I could. I became a recruiter for a few months. After that, I was in public relations. After that, I was in marketing. After that, that's when I became a freelance writer. So I've done all of these different things that were kind of almost outside of my comfort zone. And I think that really helped me figure out what it is I like, what's important to me. I like talking to people. I like getting to know people. I like communicating. I like learning. So figuring out who you are and what you like and what kind of job fits that, who you are as a person, I think that was really important for me. So I wanted a job where it was important to have relationships with people. And I think that is what I'm doing right now.
So keeping in that theme, like basically you're saying that if you explore what you like to do by just going at it and just doing different things will really help you to discover who you are.
Yes, and I think people are really afraid, especially right out of grad school, that they're going to pick the wrong thing to do. And I always tell people, just go for it. You can always quit. And that's, grad school doesn't teach you that you can quit. You cannot quit when you're in grad school. You have to stay in it no matter how hard it gets, no matter how abused you are even sometimes. Yeah. So, no, you can always quit. Yeah. And people need to remember that you are not stuck. You can leave and you can find something else that you like better.
Well, Kristen, thank you so much for your time to talk with us today. It's an honor to have you. I hope your knee will get much better, and we'll see each other in the next networking event, hopefully in the next few months.
Yes, I hope so. If not, we'll do this again.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much, Kristen, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.